They thought it was over when I walked away from that board meeting. When I let them have their smug little vote and smug little victory, they thought I was beaten. But I wasn't walking away in defeat. I was giving them a head start. I had grown up with that tree. It wasn't just some overgrown limb hanging over a sidewalk. It was a living monument in our backyard, planted by my grandfather with his own calloused hands the year I was born. Its roots ran deeper than any HOA policy, and its branches had held more birthday decorations and childhood dreams than any of those board members could imagine. So when the HOA decided it was a nuisance because a few leaves fell into their pristine parking lot, they weren't just attacking a tree. They were declaring war on my family's legacy. The notice came like they always do, an envelope with too many bold words and too little humanity. You are hereby ordered to remove the tree in question within 14 days or face daily fines of $250, signed by none other than Sharon. Of course it was Sharon, the HOA president, self-declared queen of our cold D-sack. With her aggressively landscaped front yard and a clipboard fused to her hand, Sharon, who once fined a veteran for flying a slightly oversized American flag on his porch. Sharon, who always smiled with her teeth but never with her eyes. I could have appealed. I could have filed paperwork. But Sharon had rigged the board years ago. The appeals committee was made up of her tennis partners and church friends, and they never ruled against her, not once. So I didn't go to the HOA. I went to my brother. Now, you have to understand, my brother and I aren't exactly close. He's the golden child. Always was. Head of the State Forestry Commission now. Mr. Suit and Thai Tree diplomat, we hadn't spoken much since the funeral. But this was different. This was family. This was blood. I showed up at his office unannounced. He didn't look thrilled to see me. But when I laid out the photos, the notice, the ridiculous citations, something in him changed. The same fire that used to blaze in our dad's eyes when someone messed with the family, it lit up in him too. "You're telling me," he said slowly, looking over the HOA notice, "they want to cut down a protected native oak that's been on your land since before the subdivision existed." That's what they said. He shook his head. They picked the wrong damn tree. Turns out, that oak wasn't just sentimental, it was on the state's preservation list. A heritage tree, registered, protected under 3 separate forestry regulations. The HOA wasn't just wrong, they were criminally wrong. What happened next was a beautiful unraveling. My brother didn't come back to the neighborhood quietly. No, he came with a full state enforcement team. Trucks, officials, paperwork with more seals than a presidential briefing. And when they pulled up to the HOA office, which was really just the rec center with a fax machine, I wish I could have bottled the look on Sharon's face. They served her an injunction on the spot. Not only were they prohibited from touching the tree, but they were now under investigation for illegally targeting and threatening a state protected landmark. Sharon tried to play dumb, claimed she never knew, said the board had voted, that she was just following procedure. That's when my brother dropped the real hammer. See, he'd done some digging. Turns out, Sharon had pushed similar complaints about other trees over the years, each time just before new construction or landscaping projects in the area. A few discrete payments, a few conveniently timed nuisance declarations. She was clearing land under the radar to pad her real estate investments. So when the state slapped her with a cease and desist order and opened a corruption investigation, it wasn't just about my tree anymore. It was about everything. Misuse of power, coercion, environmental violations, and suddenly those same board members who used to smile and nod every time Sharon spoke were scrambling to distance themselves. The neighborhood changed after that, not overnight, but enough. Sharon resigned, citing health reasons. She moved 2 counties over, supposedly to be near her sister, but everyone knew it was to avoid press. The HOA was forced to hold new elections. People who had stayed quiet for years, people who'd been bullied, fined, harassed. They finally spoke up, and the tree, still there, still standing, taller than ever. My brother came out one weekend and helped me build a small bench around its trunk. We sat there for a long while, not saying much, just watching the branches sway. Funny thing, after everything, the HOA sent me a final notice. Said the bench wasn't in compliance with yard aesthetics policy. I mailed it back with a photo of the injunction stapled to it. Never heard from them again. Some wars are won not by shouting, but by planting your roots deep, standing your ground and waiting for the wind to change. And when it does, make sure you're the storm. The next morning, there was a note taped to my door. Not a letter. A notice. Bold red letters stamped across the top like they were delivering a verdict. Immediate tree removal required 48 hours to comply. No signature, no explanation, just a deadline and a threat. Non-compliance would result in forced removal and a Frs. 1,000 per day fine. I stood there on my porch, gripping that flimsy sheet of paper with a hand that shook. Not from fear, but fury. They didn't even pretend to follow protocol. No hearings, no inspection, nothing in the HOA bylaws about tree size or shade or visibility lines. Nothing. But they counted on me not knowing that. They thought I'd be scared, that I'd fold, that I'd panic and start sowing through the very roots of my family's legacy just to avoid their wrath. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, is that I've dealt with cowards in suits before. I've seen how power gets drunk on silence, and I've seen what happens when the wrong people think they can play God with other people's lives. So I didn't scream. I didn't call. I didn't even react. I just smiled, walked inside, and picked up the phone. "Hey," I said calmly. "You remember that old oak behind the house?" A pause. My brother's voice crackled with static. "The one Grandpa planted when Mom was born." "Yeah." "Why?" I told him everything. The notice, the threat, the fake authority, and then I said 5 words that made everything go still. "They want me to cut it." He didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "They just declared war on the wrong family." You see, my brother isn't just some tree hugger. He's the state forestry commissioner, a literal government official in charge of protected flora, conservation lands, and environmental enforcement. He has teams, legal departments, access to statewide records, and more importantly, he loves that tree even more than I do. By sundown, he was in his truck driving to my house. What the HOA didn't realize, and what would become their biggest mistake, was that the oak wasn't just sentimental, it had been registered. Decades ago, my grandfather had applied for a heritage designation through the state's Historic Trees program. That oak was officially cataloged, geo-tagged, and protected under environmental code. They weren't just threatening a tree. They were breaking state law. The next morning, the HOA president, Karen in every way except name, showed up at my property with a landscaping crew, a smug little army with chainsaws and clipboards. I didn't come out. I didn't have to. Because just as they were unloading the equipment, a black state vehicle pulled up to the curb. My brother stepped out, badge clipped to his belt, sunglasses hiding the fire in his eyes. Karen strutted over like she was still queen of the cull, D-sack. "This is private HOA business," she barked. "You'll need to leave." He didn't even blink, just pulled a folded document from his coat and handed it to her. "This is a cease and desist order issued by the State Department of Forestry," he said coldly. "That tree is registered under Environmental Code Section 47.9b. Any attempt to cut, trim, or otherwise disturb it is a criminal offense punishable by fines and potential jail time." Karen froze. Her lips moved, but nothing came out. She looked at the paper like it was written in ancient Greek. "You can't be serious," she finally stammered. "Moo sent a removal notice. It's obstructing the..." He cut her off. "I don't care what your notice says. Your bylaws don't override state protection. That oak's been here longer than your entire HOA. You mess with it again, and you're looking at felony charges." The crew didn't even wait. They packed up faster than a busted bootleg operation. But Karen wasn't done. Oh no. The next day, I got another letter, this time claiming I'd violated neighborhood uniformity policies by refusing a maintenance directive. They threatened to sue me, said I was undermining HOA authority, and that my behavior would result in escalating penalties. So we escalated too. My brother didn't just send a legal response. He launched a formal investigation. Turns out this wasn't the first time the HOA had overstepped. He found 3 prior complaints, buried, ignored, covered up. Elderly residents bullied into removing backyard gardens. A single mother fined for putting up bird feeders. And in one case, they tore down a wheelchair, accessible ramp without notice, claiming it violated aesthetic continuity. That was all the ammunition we needed. We built a case, ironclad, bulletproof, devastating. Then came the press. A small local outlet ran the headline first. Ashe accused of environmental violations, targeting protected historic tree. Then it went statewide. Interviews, photos, a full segment on the 6 o'clock news featuring side-by-side shots of Karen's Smug A meetings and my grandfather's handwritten tree registry form. Suddenly, the narrative wasn't homeowner defies rules. It was OA bullies war hero's family violates state environmental code, faces lawsuit from forestry commissioner. The HOA board scrambled. Meetings turned into shouting matches. Neighbors who once whispered behind closed doors started speaking out, sharing stories, forming petitions. The neighborhood turned against them. And then came the audit. My brother called in a favor. The State Environmental Oversight Board assigned a compliance team to investigate every HOA decision related to land use, greenery removal, and property fines for the last 10 years. 10 years. And what they found? Fraud, embezzlement, backdoor deals with a landscaping company run by Karen's cousin, OA funds used for personal expenses, including a vacation to Aspen and a brand new hot tub for board meetings. The entire board was subpoenaed. Karen was arrested, and that tree, the one they tried to erase like it was a weed in their perfect little garden, was awarded a new plaque by the state. It reads, "The Peterson Oak, planted 1943, protected forever." Funny, isn't it? They wanted it gone because it cast a shadow. But in the end, that shadow was the one thing that exposed everything they tried to hide. And now Now, when I sit under its branches with a coffee in hand and the wind brushing through the leaves, I don't just feel peace, I feel victory. And they feel the weight of a justice they never saw coming. The hearings were public. The county courthouse filled up faster than a Black Friday sale, but this time the people weren't chasing deals, they were chasing answers. Neighbors who once tiptoed around HOA meetings now stood shoulder to shoulder, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. You could feel the energy in the air, not fear, not curiosity, but righteous anticipation. Karen walked in wearing a beige suit like it could hide the rot underneath. Behind her, the remaining board members shuffled like guilty shadows. They didn't meet anyone's eyes, but I did. And I made sure she saw me, sitting in the front row, calm, composed, with my brother beside me in uniform. And the original tree registry in a glass frame between us like a family heirloom that just became a legal exhibit. The prosecutor didn't hold back. They unveiled spreadsheets showing how HOA funds were drained, monthly landscaping fees that magically matched payments to Karen's cousin's company, which, funnily enough, existed on paper but didn't even own equipment. They brought out bank records, testimonies, forged minutes from fake OA meetings. And then came the residents. 80, Fort-year-old Mr. Tollett, voice shaking, recounted how the board fined him for putting a ramp in for his late wife. A single mom explained how they fined her for hanging a wine chime that sounded too ethnic. The stories poured in, each one like a hammer on stone. But the moment that broke the courtroom, the video, one of the residents, a quiet, soft-spoken man who kept to himself, had installed a wildlife cam in his backyard, hoping to catch glimpses of owls nesting in the Peterson oak. What he caught instead was video footage of Karen meeting with her cousin at night. He filmed her handing over envelopes, pointing at yards, giving whispered instructions with the tree behind her like a silent witness. When the judge saw it, his jaw tensed. "This is no longer just civil mismanagement," he said coldly. "This is criminal conspiracy and environmental abuse." The room went still. Karen turned pale. The press outside exploded. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, and within minutes the video hit social media. 1.3 million views in 6 hours. HO Queenpin caught red-handed in backyard shakedown. Forestry commissioner dismantles HOA from the roots up. I couldn't walk my dog without someone honking and shouting, "Justice for the oak!" But the final blow wasn't from the state. It came from the very people Karen once lorded over. A class action lawsuit. 52 homeowners joined. My brother helped connect them with legal aid. The charges ranged from harassment to illegal fines to emotional distress. Karen's personal assets were frozen. HOA was disbanded. And her cousin? He flipped. Cut a deal in exchange for testimony that sank every last board member. They lost their homes, their reputations, their precious sense of superiority. And the kicker, the state issued a formal decree reclassifying the entire neighborhood as an urban greenway conservation zone. You know what that means? Any changes to trees, shrubs, or natural features now require direct approval from, you guessed it, the Forestry Commissioner's office. So now every time someone wants to trim a branch or dig up a root, they have to go through my brother's desk. And every approval form carries my last name. Poetic doesn't even begin to describe it, but it doesn't end there. See, a local school reached out not long after the story broke. They asked if we'd consider letting students visit the tree as part of their environmental science program. They wanted to teach kids about conservation, about justice, about standing up for what's right, even when the odds seem stacked against you. We agreed. Now, every spring, classes walk the path to the Peterson oak. They sit beneath its branches and hear about the man who planted it during wartime rationing, the family who protected it, and the corrupt HOA that tried to kill it. And they learn not just about trees, but about legacy and about what happens when you underestimate the quiet ones. So if you're listening to this and someone in a pressed blazer or a smug smile is telling you to roll over, to rip out your roots, to bend to their power, just remember you're not alone. Sometimes all it takes is one tree to bring down an entire rotten system. And sometimes the best revenge is letting justice grow louder than the lies. Months passed. Karen's trial dragged on like a slow public unraveling. Every hearing revealed another crack in the porcelain image she'd spent years crafting. The polite, pearl-wearing enforcer of neighborhood standards. The woman who spoke of preserving the community. While quietly bleeding it dry, she tried everything, blamed her cousin, claimed stress, even alleged that I had orchestrated a vendetta out of personal spite. But the evidence didn't lie. The receipts were real, the testimonies damning, and the footage. That footage haunted her like a ghost. I watched her shrink over time, from the woman who once screamed on my porch that rules are rules, to someone barely able to meet the eyes of the people she used to control. She showed up to her final sentencing in flats instead of heels, no makeup, no confidence, just the hollowed-out shell of a tyrant who thought she was untouchable. The judge sentenced her to 4 years for conspiracy, fraud, and environmental destruction. She didn't even fight it, just nodded as if some part of her finally understood. She wasn't special. She wasn't above the law. As she was led away, I stood outside the courthouse, surrounded by neighbors, some I'd barely spoken to before this all began. The same people who used to nod nervously at HOA meetings, afraid of speaking out. Now they were hugging each other, smiling, thanking me, not because I was some hero, but because someone had finally drawn a line. And the tree, the Peterson oak, it bloomed bigger that spring than I'd ever seen. It stood like a monument, not just to nature, but to defiance, to survival, to quiet, rooted strength. The town council voted to place a plaque at its base. It reads, "In memory of those who stood tall when others tried to cut them down." And right beneath that, protected by the office of the State Forestry Commissioner, indefinitely. My brother smiled when he saw it. He doesn't say much when it comes to sentiment, but I caught the way he stood there a little longer than he needed to, hands in his pockets, looking up through the branches. He knew what it meant. We both did. Because this wasn't just about a tree. It was about every overreach that ever went unpunished. Every subtle act of racism Karen tried to disguise as policy. Every time someone was told to comply or leave. Every family that felt like they didn't belong because they planted sunflowers instead of trimmed hedges. It was about power. The way some people cling to it, and the way others, when pushed too far, decide to fight back. After the dust settled, something beautiful happened. People started planting again. Lawns that were once identical, regulation beige and boring, began sprouting color. Flowers, raised garden beds, birdhouses. Someone even built a little free library in the shape of a treehouse, just a block away from the Peterson oak, and not a single fine was issued. Because there was no more HOA, it was dissolved, legally, permanently, and in its place, a voluntary community council, run by residents, not rulers. They asked me to be on the board. I said no, because I never wanted power. I just wanted peace. But sometimes, to get peace, you have to start a storm, and that's exactly what I did. So if you're out there, own Karen, your own petty Terrence in pressed shirts and fake smiles. Remember, they only win if you stay quiet, if you keep your head down, if you let them tell you that the tree your grandfather planted, or the ramp your mother needs, or the garden your children love, doesn't belong. It does. You do. And sometimes the strongest roots come from knowing exactly who you are and daring them to try and cut you down. Because if they do, they just might learn. Your brother's the State Forestry Commissioner. And you're not the kind of person who folds. You're the kind who makes history. In the end, when all the letters stopped coming, when the fines vanished like smoke, and the HOA board was nothing more than a shuffled deck of retirees trying to save face, I stood beneath the Peterson oak. The very tree they tried to erase from this earth. It was still there, strong, defiant, wiser than all of us. I placed my hand on its bark, rough, weathered, scared, but alive, breathing. Just like me, we'd both been pushed. We'd both been threatened, and we'd both refused to fall. No one speaks Karen's name anymore. The board president who thought she could rewrite nature like a spreadsheet. The woman who looked at a tree and saw a liability, while the rest of us saw legacy. She was gone, quietly voted out after the incident. No thank you party, no farewell bake sale, just a notice on the HOA website that a leadership transition had taken place. What they didn't know, what they never expected, was that behind every quiet homeowner is a storm waiting to be called. They thought I was just another guy with a yard. They didn't know I had time. They didn't know I had patience. They didn't know I had blood in my veins, the kind that doesn't run when faced with petty power. I didn't win because I yelled louder. I didn't win because I threatened them back. I won because I waited, because the law was always on my side, because I didn't need to fight dirty. I just needed them to step in the wrong direction. And when they did, my brother, the State Forestry Commissioner, simply held up the mirror. Now, whenever someone new moves into the neighborhood, they're taken on a little walk, past the pool, past the rec center, and then finally to the tree. They're told a story, not as a warning, but as a promise. This is a place where people stand up, where roots run deep, where titles mean nothing when you try to destroy what matters. And if you ever forget that, just remember, that tree's still standing, and the man who fought for it, so is he.